The gavel strike was not a sound of order, but of execution. It echoed across the Grand Senate Hall of the Signian Compact, silencing the holographic banners of 100-member worlds. On the charge of high treason against the Compact and the willful sabotage of the Krelios-Terrazine Agreement. How do you find the accused? The voice of the High Chancellor, a being of pure energy contained within an obsidian suit, boomed with synthetic judgment. Below him, stripped of her royal guard and ceremonial silks, stood Princess Sirelia of House Netherian. Her dark hair was matted with sweat, her hands bound by energy cuffs that sizzled near her skin. She did not look like a dynasty heir. She looked like a cornered animal. "Guilty!" the chorus roared, 1,000 delegates rising as one. "The evidence was falsified," Sirelia shouted, her voice raw. She had spent 6 months gathering the data, cross-referencing shipping manifests with atmospheric degradation reports. The agreement wasn't just for Terrazine mining. It was planetary genocide. The gas byproduct has already sterilized 80% of the Krelios population. You are funding an extinction. Her evidence, the Chancellor interrupted, his voice cutting through her panic, is an admission of espionage. She illegally accessed sealed military and commercial archives. It's the truth. Truth is a matter of perspective. Princess, the Krelios Agreement ensures the stability of this compact and the flow of fuel to the core worlds. Your idealism has threatened 100 years of peace. Sirelia searched the delegation pods. She saw her father's station, empty. He had not come. He had abandoned her to the wolves. The realization hit her harder than the verdict. Princess Sirelia of House Netherian, the Chancellor declared, the judgment amplifying across the stars. You are hereby stripped of all titles, claims, and protections. Your name will be purged from the Netherian lineage. You are remanded to the jurisdiction of the Arena Conclave. A collective gasp sucked the air from the hall. Not a quiet execution, not a sterile exile. The Arena. Your sentence is to be carried out immediately. You will be transferred to the prison moon Erebus. You will face the Terran. The crowd erupted. This was not justice. This was entertainment. Guards seized her arms. The world dissolved into the high-frequency whine of a portal transfer. The cold marble floor of the Senate vanished, replaced by hot, rust-colored sand. She fell to her knees, the transition sickness churning in her stomach. The roar was deafening, a physical weight pressing against her. It was not the processed, polite anger of the Senate. This was a raw, billion-throated sound, amplified by the arena's broadcast system. She looked up. A sickly yellow sky stretched over a colossal crater, kilometers wide, ringed by watchtowers and prison blocks. This was Erebus, the arena of beasts. And there she is, spectators, a voice boomed from the sky, synthesized and dripping with false excitement. The traitor princess, stripped of her silks and thrown onto the sands, just like the criminals she tried to protect. Holographic screens, invisible from the ground, flickered to life in the sky, showing her face, streaked with dirt and tears, to the galaxy. The broadcast was live. But she is not alone, the announcer bellowed. The Conclave has granted her a welcoming party, the Beast of Terra, the Man-Eater, the legend himself, Cade. A gate hissed open on the far side of the arena. Sirelia scrambled backward, pushing herself up, her eyes fixed on the darkness within the tunnel. The crowd's chant changed. Cade, Cade, Cade. He emerged, not with a roar, but with a predator's silence. He was huge, a wall of scarred muscle and feral grace, clad in mismatched prisoner rags and salvaged armor. He carried no weapon. His dark hair was shorn short, his face grim. He looked bored, his eyes scanning the crowd with utter contempt. He was just a man. A Terran. "Look at him," the announcer screamed. "He's scanning for the threat. The savage beast smells like royalty." Cade's gaze passed over Sirelia, dismissed her, and settled on another figure she hadn't noticed. A hulking, four-armed prisoner, a Zalopian convict, was creeping toward her from the side, a jagged piece of metal in his lowest hand. He was ignoring Cade, his eyes fixed on Sirelia. An easy kill, a way to win favor with the guards. The Zylopian lunged. Sirelia screamed, throwing her bound hands up. A blur of motion. Cade crossed 20 meters of sand in 3 strides. He didn't block the attack. He intercepted the attacker. He caught the Zylopian's wrist. The sound of bones snapping clean echoed in the sudden hush. Cade didn't stop. He spun, using the convict's momentum, and drove his knee into the alien's torso. Ribs cracked. The Zylopian crumpled, choking on his own green blood. Cade stood over him, breathing evenly. He hadn't even looked at Sirelia. The crowd was silent. The announcer stammered, A surprise move. The Terran protects the princess. Is this an alliance? Or does the beast simply want the kill for himself?" Cade slowly turned his head. He looked past Sirelia, past the arena walls, and up. He looked directly into the sky, as if he could see the billion souls watching him. The arena's audio sensors strained to pick up his voice, rough from disuse, yet it carried across the galaxy. "I am not your beast. Broadcast hubs on 5 systems are nearly overloaded. Technicians scrambled, commentators shouted for confirmation. The mute, the mindless savage of Erebus, had spoken. She is not your sacrifice," Cade continued, his voice a cold rasp. "And I am done being a tool for your spectacle. Find another monster." He kicked the weapon away from the groaning Zylopian, then walked to the center of the arena, sat down on the sand, and crossed his legs. He closed his eyes, ignoring the princess, the downed prisoner, and the galaxy watching him. He was waiting. Stunned silence, then anger. The crowd began to boo. They had been promised a slaughter, a princess torn apart by a savage. They had received defiance. "Guarda!" the announcer finally shouted, recovering. "Subdue the assets. Subdue them now." Shock prods crackled to life as guards poured from the gates. Cade didn't move. He waited until they were almost upon him before he uncoiled, disarming 2 and crippling a third before the rest pinned him under a mountain of bodies and the high-voltage sting of their weapons. Another squad grabbed Sirelia. She didn't fight. She was dragged away, her eyes locked on the man being beaten into the sand. The broadcast feed went black. The cell was a 6x6 metal box, slick with condensation and the smell of old fear. A single, flickering light plate in the ceiling cast more shadows than illumination. They had been thrown in together, the guards laughing as the heavy door sealed. "The beast needs his snack." Sirelia pressed herself into the corner farthest from him. She was trembling, the adrenaline of the arena fading into a deep, bone-chilling terror. He sat against the opposite wall, tending to a burn on his arm from a shock prod. He moved with an economy of motion, tearing a strip from his own ragged shirt to wrap the wound. He had not spoken. He had not even looked at her. He was terrifying, but not in the way the galaxy believed. He wasn't a mindless animal. He was something colder, something contained. He was a man who had survived this place for so long he had become a part of it. She had to break the silence. "Why?" Her voice was a dry whisper. He didn't look up. "You saved me. In the arena. Why?" His hands stopped moving. He slowly raised his head and his eyes, a deep, cold gray, locked onto hers. "I didn't save you," he said, his voice clearer now, a low baritone. I stopped him. There's a difference. The guards, the crowd, they wanted you to kill me. The crowd wants whatever the announcers tell them to want. He finished the knot on his bandage and leaned his head back against the metal wall. They said you were a savage, a mute. A humorless puff of air escaped his lips. It's easier to sell tickets if the monster fits the description. Mute is good. Mindless is better. She stared at him, at the topography of scars that mapped his arms and shoulders. Who are you? I'm Cade. That's all you need to know. I am Sirelia of... She stopped. The Chancellor's words echoed, stripped of all titles. I am just Sirelia. I know who you are, Princess. I've watched your trial for the last 3 days on the common room feed. You kicked the nest. Now you're in the pit with the rest of it. The Krelios genocide, it was real. I had to expose it. Good for you, he said flatly. Your truth costs you your world. Here truth is just a word. Survival is the only law. He closed his eyes, a clear dismissal. But she couldn't stop. She was a politician, a diplomat. Silence was a vacuum she had to fill. What happens tomorrow? Tomorrow, he said, his eyes still closed. The conclave will be angry. The spectators were denied their blood. They will demand a reset. A reset? A full format match. A real beast. Not just a prisoner with a shiv. A new wave of fear made her stomach clench. And us? We fight. Or we die. Or both. You seem to know how this works. You fought them. In the arena. You spoke. You defied them. Maybe we can reason with them. If we work together. His eyes opened and the coldness in them silenced her. He leaned forward, the faint light glinting off the anger in his gaze. You listen to me, Princess. You are not in the Senate anymore. There is no reason. There are no alliances. You survived your first hour because I chose to intervene. You will not survive your second day if you think you understand this place. He pushed himself up and walked the 2 steps to where she huddled. He crouched down, forcing her to meet his stare. He was close enough for her to feel the heat radiating from his skin. I am not your friend. I am not your protector. I am a prisoner who just made our situation infinitely worse by showing the guards I'm not the mindless animal they thought I was. They will punish me for that. And they will punish you for being associated with me. She wanted to look away, but his gaze held her captive. So here are the new rules, he whispered, his voice intense. You stay silent. You watch everything. You learn. And you trust no one, not the guards, not the other prisoners, and especially, he paused, not me. Do you understand? She could only nod, her throat too tight to speak. Good. He retreated to his wall, the brief, violent spark of energy gone, replaced by the cold, patient survivor. He sat, closed his eyes, and regulated his breathing. Within minutes, he appeared to be asleep. Sirelia did not sleep. She watched him, the shadows of the flickering light dancing on his scarred face, and for the first time in her life, she understood true, absolute loneliness. The morning came not with the sunrise, but with the shriek of metal on metal as their cell door was wrenched open. Guards flooded in, grabbing them both. Big day, Cade! The lead guard sneered, jabbing him with a shock prod. The warden himself has authorized a reset. You wanted to talk? Let's see you talk your way out of this one. They were dragged back into the arena. The sand had been raked. The Xylopian's body was gone. The crowd was already roaring, their bloodlust from yesterday stoked into a frenzy. Sirelia was shoved into a reinforced alcove set into the arena wall. A transparent shield of solid plasma slamming down to lock her in. The prize, the announcer called her. Cade was thrown onto the sand, a heavy single-edged gladiatorial sword tossed at his feet. "Spectators," the announcer boomed, his voice ecstatic. "We apologize for yesterday's technical difficulties. The asset Cade has been recalibrated, and today we have a very special blood sport match. From the cybernetic kennels of Xylos, we give you the Juggernaut." A gate twice the size of the one Cade had used groaned open. It was massive, a 4-ton nightmare of fused alien muscle and badly wired technology. It looked like a reptilian gorilla, its hide reinforced with plates of scavenged armor. One arm had been replaced with a hydraulic pincer, the other with a plasma-venting cannon. Red optical sensors glowed beneath a steel-plated skull. It roared, a sound like a factory exploding, and charged. Cade snatched the sword and ran. He didn't run away. He ran toward the wall, using it to launch himself up and over the beast's initial, clumsy charge. The Juggernaut slammed into the arena wall, shaking the entire crater. "He's fast," the announcer shrieked, "but he can't run forever." Cade landed, rolled, and came up facing the beast. He wasn't breathing hard. He was watching, diagnosing. The Juggernaut turned, its plasma cannon whining as it powered up. It fired a blast of blue-white energy that superheated the sand where Cade had been a second before. Cade was already moving, sprinting in a low crouch. He was closing the distance. "He's insane!" The beast swiped with its hydraulic pincer, a move designed to cut a mech in half. Cade slid under it, the wind of the motion tearing at his shirt. As he slid, he slashed upward with his sword, not at the armor, but at the thick, unshielded cables running from the pincer to the beast's shoulder. Sparks erupted. The pincer arm locked, spasmed, and went dead. The Juggernaut roared in pain, or perhaps confusion, and tried to bring its cannon to bear. Cade was too close, inside its turning radius. He drove his shoulder into the beast's leg, plunging the sword deep into the soft joint of its knee. He didn't leave the sword. He ripped it free and vaulted away as the beast collapsed, its leg buckling. It was crippled. It thrashed on the sand, its plasma cannon firing wildly into the sky. It was no longer a terrifying weapon. It was a dying animal trapped in a broken machine. The crowd sensed the kill. "End it! End it! End it!" Cade walked slowly toward the fallen creature. He raised his sword. The beast's one good eye, organic and terrified, tracked him. It let out a low whine. From her cage, Cyrelia watched, her hands pressed against the plasma shield. She saw him hesitate. His expression wasn't one of victory, it was tired. He looked at the pained animal. He looked up at the roaring, bloodthirsty crowd. Then he looked at his sword. With a sudden, clean motion, he plunged the blade through the beast's optical sensor, a quick, clean mercy kill that ended its suffering instantly. The crowd exploded in cheers. Cade stood over the massive corpse. He was breathing hard now, not from exertion, but from anger. He looked at the sword in his hand, slick with oil and blood. With a roar of his own, a sound of pure disgust, he threw the sword. It spun end over end, clattering against the plasma shield of Cyrelia's alcove. Startling her, he turned his back on the kill. He turned his back on the crowd. He walked to the center of the arena and sat down, waiting for the guards. In the primary broadcast booth, the head commentator stared at his timer, his microphone accidentally live. 34 minutes, he whispered, awestruck. "What?" his partner asked. "From the gate drop to the kill. 34 minutes. The simulation projection said it was unbeatable. He didn't just fight it. He dismantled it. He tamed it." The whisper went out across the galaxy. The cheers in the arena died first, replaced by a confused, stunned silence. The spectators in their homes and bars across the core worlds watched the replay. The announcer was right. It wasn't a fight. It was a dissection. He had broken the unbreakable beast. The thrill of the kill vanished, replaced by a strange, cold awe. The myth of the Terran beast, the mindless savage, shattered. In its place, something far more dangerous began to grow. The legend of Cade Mercer, the man who tamed the pit, far from Erebus, in a room lit only by the dark glow of a private command console. A figure watched the feed. The screen showed Cade sitting in the sand, defiant. A gloved hand moved across the console, cutting the public broadcast. "This has gone on long enough," a cold synthetic voice said to the empty room. "The asset is compromised. Send the termination squad. I want him dead by nightfall. And the girl, find out what her father told her before she fell." The plasma shield locking Sirelia in her alcove hissed and retracted into the wall. The arena guards were moving, slow and wary, their shock prods raised. They were waiting for Cade to move, but he remained seated in the sand, a statue of defiance over the corpse of the juggernaut. "Get up, asset," the lead guard shouted, his voice betraying a tremor of fear. Cade didn't move. He was baiting them, drawing them in. Sirelia saw his plan a half-second before it happened. He wasn't waiting for the guards. He was waiting for the distraction. As the first guard lunged, Cade moved. He exploded to his feet, but not toward the guards. He sprinted toward Sirelia. He grabbed her arm before she could even react, yanking her from the alcove. "Move!" he roared. "He's got the princess!" the announcer shrieked to the galaxy. "The beast has taken the prize!" Cade ignored the chaos. He dragged her past the fallen juggernaut, toward a section of the arena wall that looked identical to the rest. He shoved her against the rust-colored stone. "In here. Now!" "In where?" she panted. He slammed his fist into a nearly invisible seam. A 3-meter-wide panel of rockcrete groaned, vibrated, and slid sideways, revealing a black, dripping tunnel. "This is not part of the prison," she said, pulling back. "It's the original prison," he said, shoving her through. "Before the arena, before the broadcasts. Move!" He followed her in, and the stone door sealed behind them, cutting off the roar of the crowd, the shouts of the guards, and the hot yellow light. They were plunged into absolute darkness and a sudden, shocking cold. The air was different. It was thin, metallic, saturated with the smell of ozone and ancient decay. Sirelia choked on it, her lungs, accustomed to the filtered, perfect air of the royal palaces, rejecting the toxic damp. A small, weak beam of light flickered to life. Cade had a tiny, scavenged illuminator. It lit a narrow, circular tunnel of pitted metal, slick with black moisture. Water dripped from unseen cracks, the sound echoing endlessly. "Where are we?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Under the arena. These are the old aqueduct tunnels, pre-compact. The guards won't follow us down here. They're afraid of them." "Afraid of what?" "What's left." He started walking, his steps sure and practiced. The beam of light danced ahead of them. Sirelia stumbled, her thin prisoner's sandals slipping on the slick floor. She was already shivering, the cold seeping into her bones. Her coughing grew worse, a dry hacking sound that scraped her throat. Cade stopped. He turned his face a mask of annoyance in the weak light. "You're too loud." I can't breathe," she wheezed, leaning against the curved wall. She was dizzy, her vision tunneling. The atmosphere was poisoning her. He cursed, a low, harsh sound. He dug into a pouch on his belt and pulled out a small metallic object. He shoved it against her mouth. "A rebreather. Military grade. I have 2. This one's half spent, but it will scrub the worst of it. Breathe slowly. Don't waste it." She sucked in a breath. The air was still cold, but it was clean, and the burning in her lungs subsided. The mask, designed for a soldier's helmet, fit awkwardly on her face, but she held it in place. He watched her for a moment. Then, with another grunt of impatience, he unlatched the heavy, scavenged coat he wore over his rags. It was stiff, smelling of sweat and iron. He threw it at her. "Put it on. Your shivering will get us both killed." She didn't argue. She wrapped the heavy coat around her small frame. It was enormous, weighted down with hidden plates of armor, but it was warm. The residual heat of his body clung to it. "Thank you," she said, her voice muffled by the mask. "Don't thank me," he snapped. "You're a liability. This makes you less of one. Now keep up." He turned and walked, and she followed his light into the oppressive dark. They walked for what felt like hours, descending deeper into the moon's crust. The only sound was the drip of water and the distant mournful groan of ancient machinery. Finally, they reached a small junction, a dry maintenance alcove set into the wall. Cade held up a hand, and his light died, plunging them back into blackness. "What is it?" she whispered. "We wait," he hissed. "Listen." She held her breath. At first, nothing. Then she heard it, far above them, a faint, rhythmic thud. It was the sound of heavy boots on metal flooring. A patrol. They waited in the suffocating dark. Sirelia leaned against the wall, the adrenaline of the arena, the fight, and the escape finally crashing over her. The rebreather mask slipped from her fingers. Her knees buckled. Cade caught her before she hit the floor, his arm shooting out like a piston, stopping her. She was too exhausted to be afraid of his touch. She was just falling. "We rest here," he said, his voice quiet. He gently lowered her to the floor. 2 hours, no more. He sat near the mouth of the alcove, his back to the tunnel, a sentinel in the dark. Sirelia curled into a ball, pulling his coat tight. The combination of the thin, toxic air and her utter exhaustion pulled her under. She fell into a dream of white marble and cold sunlight. She was 10 years old, running down the holographic corridors of the Netherian palace. She was late. Her mother was waiting. She found her not in the throne room, but in the medical wing, pale and thin against the white sheets of a bio-bed. "You must be strong, my star," her mother whispered, her voice weak. "Stronger than they know. Our whole world is built on secrets. Sirelia, you must learn which ones to keep." "I don't want secrets," she'd cried, clutching her mother's hand. "I want you. That is the one thing you cannot have." Her mother's hand went limp. The dream shifted. She was in her father's study. He was handing her the Krelios file, his face grim and shadowed. "This is a state matter, daughter, not a moral one. The stability of the compact is paramount. Do not look." "But they're dying," she protested. "It is a necessary cost." She woke with a gasp, the cold metal of the tunnel floor shocking her back to reality. The air was still, the thudding gone. Cade hadn't moved. He sat perfectly still, his head leaning back against the wall. He appeared to be asleep, but she knew he wasn't. She watched him in the faint ambient light that filtered down from some unseen grate. The mask of the arena beast was gone. His face, in repose, was younger than she'd thought, but etched with a profound, weary sadness. The scars on his arms were silver in the dimness. He wasn't a monster. He was a cage, built to hold an ocean of pain. She wondered what secrets he kept, what necessary cost had put him here. He didn't sleep. He listened. He listened to the groan of the prison moon, to the dripping water, to the princess's ragged breathing. He listened And he remembered. The memory hit him, as it always did in the quiet, like a physical blow. He was Captain Cade Mercer. His uniform was clean, the blue and gold of the Terran Expeditionary Force. The sky above him was orange, choked with the smoke of a burning world. Karen Prime. "Sir, the order is confirmed," his lieutenant said, his face pale. "Compact Command has authorized Phase 2. Sanitize the valley. The rebel contingent is using the civilian population as shields." Cade looked at the tactical display. The valley was a refugee camp, 50,000 heat signatures, men, women, children. "They're not shields," Cade said, his voice dangerously quiet. "They're just people. Sir, the order is to purge the sympathizers. They're calling the population acceptable losses." Cade looked at the burning city, then at the valley. He thought of the billions watching the war on the broadcast feeds, cheering for the compact, for stability, for peace built on graves. He powered down his targeting solution. "Negative, Lieutenant. We're a rescue battalion. We don't sanitize civilians." "Sir," the lieutenant pleaded, "this comes from the High Chancellor himself. Refusal is treason." "Then I guess I'm a traitor." Cade opened a channel to the fleet. "This is Captain Mercer. My battalion is powering down weapons. We will not fire on the Karen Valley. We will hold this position and accept their surrender. Any compact ship that fires on our position will be treated as hostile." The sky went silent. For 3 hours, he was a hero. Then the compact armada arrived. The court-martial took less than 20 minutes. For disobedience, for treason, and for prioritizing a rebel world over the stability of the compact. The judge intoned, "Your name is stripped. Your rank is null. You are remanded to the arena of beasts. Let the pit have mercy on your soul." He was thrown into Erebus, a soldier forced to become a savage to survive. He'd been that savage for 6 years. His eyes snapped open. The princess was staring at him. He hated the pity he saw in her eyes. "The patrol is gone," he said, his voice all cold steel again. He pushed himself to his feet. "We move." The tunnels grew narrower, forcing them to crouch. The air was thick with a new, acrid smell, a chemical stench. "Where does this lead?" Sirelia asked, her voice tight. "To a lower level. An old waste cistern. It's the only way to the outer maintenance zones." He rounded a corner and froze. He shoved Sirelia back against the wall, his hand over her mouth, his body shielding hers. His light was off. Ahead, in a wider circular chamber, a low, flickering fire cast leaping shadows. 3 figures were huddled around it. They were prisoners, but twisted. Their skin was pale, stretched taut over gaunt frames. Patches of their flesh were missing, replaced by crude, sparking cybernetics. Bioenhancers, green and pulsing, were grafted to their spines, scavengers. The arena's failed experiments, thrown down here to die. One of them looked up, its optical implants whirring as they focused. It sniffed the air. "Meat," it hissed, a sound like steam from a broken pipe. "Fresh." They were on their feet in an instant, moving with a twitching, unnatural speed. Cade shoved Sirelia behind him. "The one on the right has a weak leg. The one in the middle is slow. The leader is fast. Stay out of sight." "Cade, no!" He ignited his light, not to see, but to blind them. The scavengers shrieked, throwing their augmented arms up. Cade was on them. He moved like he had in the arena, a brutal, efficient storm. He had no sword, just a length of sharpened pipe he'd pulled from his boot. He slammed the pipe into the right one's knee, shattering the joint. He spun, ducking under a wild swing from the slow one, and drove his elbow into its throat, crushing its windpipe. The leader, its face a mess of wires and teeth, ignored Cade. It saw the easier prey. It scrambled up the wall like an insect and leaped over Cade's head, landing directly in front of Sirelia. She screamed, falling back. It raised a hand tipped with sharpened metal claws. There was no time to think, no time for politics or fear. Her hand brushed against a loose chunk of rebar on the floor. She grabbed it, a 2-foot length of rusted, heavy steel. As the creature lunged, she screamed again, not in fear but in rage, and thrust the rebar upward with all her strength. It hit the creature's chest with a sickening, wet crunch. The scavenger stopped. It looked down at the metal bar protruding from its sternum, then up at her. Its optical implants flickered, dimmed, and went dark. It collapsed at her feet. Silence. The other two were down, Cade standing over them. The fire crackled. Sirelia stared at the body, at her hands, slick with the creature's black, oily blood. The rebar was still in its chest. She dropped to her knees, turned, and was violently sick. The reality of what she had done, the final absolute act of killing, ripped through her. This wasn't a political debate. This wasn't an execution order. This was her, with her own hands, ending a life. She collapsed against the wall, her body racked with deep, agonizing sobs. She shook until her teeth chattered. Cade watched her. He didn't move to comfort her. He didn't offer a kind word. He simply waited, wiping his pipe clean on the scavenger's rags. He gave her the dignity of her breakdown, letting it run its course. Finally, the sobs quieted. She was empty, cold, and hollow. She looked up at him through tear-streaked eyes, her face a mask of grime and misery. "You're not a beast," she whispered, her voice broken. She had just seen what a beast was. She had just become a killer, and she understood in that moment the difference. Cade looked at the body she had killed, then back at her. He saw the princess, shattered. He saw the woman, forged. "Neither are you," he said. He pulled her to her feet. Her legs were weak, but she stood. He found a new tunnel. "We can't stay here. The smell will draw more." He found a new hideout, a small, sealed maintenance closet built into the tunnel wall. It was cramped, barely large enough for one person to stand, let alone two to sit. He slid the heavy metal door shut, and the deadbolt, miraculously, still functioned. It plunged them into near-total darkness, the only light coming from a single dying red status light on a dead control panel. "We stay here until the next patrol cycle," he said. His voice was strained. He slumped against the far wall, his breath hissing through his teeth. "You're hurt," she said. "It wasn't a question." "It's nothing. The leader's claw." "Let me see." She moved closer, her knees brushing his in the tiny space. "I said it's nothing." He flinched away, a purely instinctual reaction. Vulnerability was death in this place. "Stop it!" Her voice was sharp, the command of an heir, not the plea of a refugee. "You're no good to me bleeding to death in a closet, Let me see the wound." The authority in her voice broke through his defenses. He grunted, a sound of grudging assent. She used his illuminator, setting it on a small shelf. The beam lit the small space, and she saw the gash, a deep, 4-pronged tear in his side, just above his hip. It was bleeding sluggishly, but it was deep. "This armor plate has to come off," she said, her voice clinical. He hesitated. The scavenged plastoid armor was his last line of defense. Slowly, his fingers clumsy, he undid the straps. The armor clattered to the floor. He wore a thin, torn black undershirt. "That too. I need to clean the wound." He glared at her, but his movements were sluggish. He was losing blood. He tried to pull the shirt over his head, but it snagged on the wound. He hissed, a sharp intake of breath. "Stay still," she commanded, her voice softening. She moved closer, kneeling between his legs. The space was so small she was practically in his lap. Her hands, still trembling slightly, found the hem of his shirt. "Lift your arms." He did. She gently worked the fabric upward, her fingers brushing the hot, tense skin of his abdomen. He was rigid as stone, his every muscle locked. The shirt came free and she tossed it aside. She gasped. In the stark, white light, his torso was a history of violence, a road map of old scars, a puckered circle from a plasma bolt on his shoulder, the jagged, pale line of a vibro blade across his ribs, the mottled, angry red of an old chemical burn. He was just a man, solid, scarred, and radiating a furnace-like heat. "This will hurt," she whispered. She took the last of the clean water from her canteen and poured it over the wound. He stiffened, his jaw clenching so hard a muscle jumped, but he made no sound. She tore a long, clean strip from the hem of her own prisoner's tunic. "Press this against it, hard." He put his hand over hers, pressing the makeshift bandage to the wound. Her fingers were trapped between his hand and his skin. They sat in silence. Her head bowed, his head leaned back against the steel wall. The air was thick, charged with their proximity, with the scent of his blood, with the shared, unspoken trauma of the last 2 days. It was the most intimate and most terrifying moment of her life. She had to break the silence. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He didn't open his eyes. "Why what? Why did you save me? In the arena, the first time you said it wasn't to save me, but it was. You could have let him kill me. You could have done it yourself." "Why?" He was silent for so long she thought he hadn't heard her, or wouldn't answer. The only sound was their breathing, one ragged, one controlled. When he finally spoke, his voice was a low, rough rasp, heavy with a truth he hadn't spoken in years. "The crowd wanted a monster," he said. "The guards wanted a beast. The senators wanted a spectacle. They were all cheering for an execution." He opened his eyes, and his cold, gray gaze found hers in the dark. "But you screamed like a person, not a senator." Before she could absorb the weight of his words, a high-pitched whine filled the air. Cade's eyes snapped wide, all exhaustion vanishing. "What is that?" He was already moving, shoving her behind him and grabbing his armor plate. The whine intensified, climbing the scale until it hurt their ears. A deep, seismic thud rattled the very bones of the moon. Then a deafening explosion ripped through the tunnel system just outside their door. The closet shook violently. The walls cracked. Dust and debris rained from the ceiling. The heavy steel door groaned, its frame visibly warping from the blast. Another explosion farther away, and then another closer. "They're collapsing the tunnels," Cade snarled, pushing himself to his feet. He slammed his shoulder against the warped door. It didn't budge. "The termination squad. They're not just trying to kill us, they're trying to bury us." He threw his weight against the door again, fused, trapped. Cirelia's eyes darted to the back of the small closet, to a small rusted access panel she hadn't noticed before. A faded stencil read, "Zone 9, Dead Tech Maintenance, Hazard, No Life Support." "Cade," she said, her voice trembling as she pointed. "What about that?" He turned and stared at the panel. He put his hand on the rusted metal. It was cold. "That," he said, his voice grim, "is where the arena dumps its failures, the broken experiments, the failed weapons, the things that were too unstable even for the pit." Another explosion, this one terrifyingly close, shook the very floor. The ceiling above them began to crack. "It's our only way out," Cade jammed his sharpened pipe into the rusted seam of the maintenance panel and threw his entire weight against it. The metal screeched in protest. Outside in the tunnel, the shockwave of another heavier explosion slammed into their warped cell door, buckling it inward, showering the tiny closet with dust. "It's now or never, princess," he grunted, his muscles straining. The panel gave way, popping its rusted bolts and crashing inward into the darkness. A rush of foul, refrigerated air, thick with the smell of battery acid and rot, hit them. "Go! Go!" Cade shoved her through the small square opening. Sirelia tumbled out onto a floor of metal grating, landing hard on her hands and knees. She scrambled forward as Cade dropped down behind her. A final deafening blast rocked the tunnel system above. The sound of 1,000,000,000 tons of rock and metal collapsing followed, a final thunderous groan. The way back was gone. They were buried. Cade flicked on his illuminator. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a cavern so vast its ceiling was lost in shadows. This was not a tunnel. It was a graveyard. They were standing on a high catwalk overlooking a chasm filled with mountains of refuse, piles of shattered automatons, limbs twisted at impossible angles, ranks of dull insectoid war drones, stacked like cordwood, leaking chemical vats, glowing with a faint sickly green luminescence. Failed weapons, half disassembled, sparked fitfully in the gloom. Zone 9. The place where the arena's failed experiments were dumped and forgotten. "This way," Cade said, his voice tight. His wound was bleeding freely again. She could see the dark stains spreading on his rags. "Stay on the catwalk. The floor might be unstable." They moved through the mechanical graveyard, the only sound their footsteps on the grating and the distant, constant drip of chemical waste. The air was frigid, and so toxic that Sirelia's rebreather, even half spent, was the only reason she was still conscious. She saw a glint of metal in a pile of debris below, a cybernetic arm, its fingers still twitching, opening and closing in a silent spasm. "What was this place?" she whispered, horrified. "A weapons development lab, pre-compact. The prison moon was built on its foundations. The arena conclave just found a new way to use the old facilities." He swept his light over a row of massive, dormant machines. "They test new tech on the prisoners. Bioenhancers, weaponized AI, cybernetics. The ones that work go to the arena. The ones that fail, or fail too spectacularly, end up here." They walked for what felt like a mile, the catwalk twisting deeper into the chasm. Cade was slowing, his hand pressed hard against his side. He stumbled, catching himself on the railing. "You need to rest," she said, grabbing his arm. "Can't," he forced out. "They'll send drones. They know about this place." As if summoned by his words, a sensor on the wall ahead of them flickered from red to green. A bank of ancient terminals sparked to life, their screens glowing a faint blue. A synthesized voice, tinny and corrupted by static, echoed through the cavern. "Intrusion detected. Sector 4. Biosignatures. Unregistered. Activating. Defense. Protocols." Cade shoved Sirelia behind him, raising his pipe. "Get ready." A new voice cut through the static, this one clearer, more refined, but just as ancient. "Hold. Biosignature. Scanned. Cross-referencing. Compact military archives. 7. 3. 4. A holographic projector on the ceiling flickered, projecting a hazy blue image of Cade's face. Not the scarred, feral face of the prisoner, but a younger, cleaner man in a formal military uniform. Designation: Captain Cade Mercer, Terran Expeditionary Force, Battalion 734. Status: active. Welcome back, Captain, the AI said. Your last standing order, to hold the Karen Valley, is still pending. My apologies for the delay. This unit has been offline for 6 standard years. Cyrelia stared at the hologram, then at the man beside her. Captain? Cade ignored her. He was staring at the terminal. Unit, what is your designation? Logistical AI Unit 7L3, Archie. I served as quartermaster for your battalion. Captain, it is good to see you. You appear to be damaged. Archie, I need an exit, an unregistered transport, and something that can get us to the surface. Understood, Captain. The termination squads have sealed the primary shafts. However, the old Reaper project bay is still shielded and viable. A long-range cargo drone is on standby. It is not optimal for atmospheric flight, but it will function. Karen Valley, Cyrelia whispered, the pieces slamming together in her mind. Karen Prime, the refugee crisis, the world her father and the Compact had sanctioned. The world media had branded a nest of traitors. That's why you were sent here. You refused to fire on civilians. Cade's jaw tightened. Archie, the bay, now. Of course, Captain, follow the guide lights. A series of green lights illuminated a new path on the catwalk. As they moved, Cyrelia's mind raced. He wasn't a criminal. He was a war hero, branded a traitor for an act of conscience. The Compact hadn't just imprisoned him. They had erased his identity, turning him into a beast for their entertainment, a monster to cover their own war crimes. And her father. Her father had signed those orders. He had known. The genocide she had exposed was not the Compact's first. She felt a cold, hard anger replace her fear. Her father hadn't just abandoned her. He had betrayed the entire galaxy. The drone bay was smaller, cleaner, shielded from the decay of the main cavern. The craft was ugly, a functional brick of black metal with oversized engines. Cade hit the cockpit release, and a ramp lowered. It was a 2-seater, the interior stripped down to bare wiring and 2 acceleration couches. Get in, Cade ordered, sliding into the pilot's seat. Cyrelia strapped herself into the co-pilot's couch. The cockpit was cramped, their knees almost touching. Cade's hands flew over the controls, his military training surfacing through the years of blood and sand. The console lit up, the engines whining to life with a low-frequency hum. I can't pilot this and manage shields and weapons, he said, his voice strained. He was pale, a fine sheen of sweat on his forehead. Your hands are clean. You're on weapons. I don't know how. You're about to learn. He pointed to a small tactile joystick and 2 large toggles, one red, one blue. This is your targeting reticle. The blue toggle raises rear shields. The red one fires the plasma pulse cannons. Don't hit the shields and the cannons at the same time, or you'll fry the system. Got it? I think so. Good. He grabbed the main yoke. Archie, open the shaft. A massive circular door in the ceiling irised open, revealing a vertical ventilation shaft miles deep. Good luck, Captain Mercer, the AI's voice echoed. Hold on, Cade said. He slammed the throttle forward. The drone shot up the shaft, the acceleration crushing Cyrelia into her seat. They rocketed upward, the metal walls of the shaft a gray blur. We're coming up on the surface, Cade said, his eyes on the pressure sensors. It's going to be rough. Be ready on those shields. Just try not to get us killed, Captain, she snapped, her hands tight on the controls. A flicker of a smile touched his lips. I'll do my best, Princess. The sarcasm felt strange, a sharp, fragile thing. It was the first time they had spoken as equals. They burst out of the shaft, not into open space, but onto the desolate, wind-swept surface of the prison moon. A sickly yellow sky stretched above a landscape of craters and rock spires. For a second, there was silence, a breathless moment of freedom. Then the sky lit up. 3 sleek black ships dropped from the upper atmosphere, their forms cutting through the thin clouds. They were angular, lethal, nothing like the bulky prison craft. Bounty hunters. A channel crackled open, filling the cockpit with a harsh, gloating voice. Well, well. Look what the cat pulled out of the pit. The Princess Cyrelia. 50 million credit bounty. Alive. The man is disposable. Power down your craft, little girl, and we'll even let him live. He's lying, Cade and Cyrelia said at the same time. Cade wrenched the drone into a hard dive, pulling it behind a massive rock spire. Laser fire, bright purple and deadly, seared the air where they had been. They're faster than we are, Cyrelia yelled as the ship shuddered. But we know the ground, Cade snarled. He pushed the drone low, skimming the cratered floor, his knuckles white on the yoke. One of our 6. Shields. Now! Cyrelia slammed the blue toggle. A shimmer of energy enveloped the rear of the drone, just as a volley of plasma bolts hit them. The ship screamed, alarms blaring. Hold them off, Cade shouted. I need to find cover. They're too fast. She gripped the joystick, centered the reticle on the closest ship, and mashed the red toggle. Twin bolts of blue plasma shot from the rear of the drone. They were clumsy, wide shots. Lead them. Don't shoot where they are. Shoot where they're going. I'm a politician, not a gunner. You're a fast learner. Do it. The bounty hunter was right on their tail. Cyrelia took a breath, aimed ahead of the ship's path, and fired again. One bolt missed, the other struck the hunter's port engine. The ship veered, smoking, but didn't stop. Good hit, Cade yelled. He saw it, a deep, jagged ravine, a black scar across the moon's surface. I'm taking us in. They'll follow us. That's the plan. He dove the heavy cargo drone into the canyon, the walls a blur of rock just meters from the cockpit. The bounty hunters followed, their smaller ships more maneuverable. They're flanking us, Cyrelia shouted. I see them! Rear shields! Now! She hit the shields. The ship shuddered from impacts on both sides. Cade, your side! He looked down. The G-force from the maneuvers had torn his wound wide open. He wasn't just bleeding, he was hemorrhaging. His vision was tunneling, his hands slipping on the controls. Fire! He commanded, his voice weak. She fired wildly, forcing the hunters to break off. But the lead ship was still behind them. I can't shake him, she cried. Cade looked at her. His eyes were unfocused, but his resolve was iron. Brace yourself. He cut the throttle. The sudden deceleration threw Cyrelia against her harness. The lead bounty hunter, caught by surprise, shot past them. Cade slammed the throttle forward again, ramming their heavy drone directly into the hunter's side. The screech of metal on metal was deafening. The hunter's ship exploded, a fireball that lit the entire ravine. But the victory was fatal. The drone, its nose crumpled from the impact, was spinning out of control. Alarms shrieked. Cade! He was slumped over the controls, unconscious. The drone was plummeting. The ravine wall was rushing toward them. Cyrelia screamed. She grabbed her own yoke, pulling back with all her strength, but it was too slow, too heavy. The drone's wing clipped the canyon wall. The world dissolved into a violent, tearing shriek of metal. The cockpit smashed against the rock, rolled, and then everything went black. Pain. Cyrelia's first sensation was a blinding pain in her head. She was hanging upside down, held by her harness. Smoke filled the cockpit, a thick, acrid smell of burning electronics. The drone was groaning, threatening to tear apart. She looked to her left. Cade was motionless, His body slumped forward, his harness the only thing holding him in the seat. His left arm was twisted at an unnatural angle, and a piece of the shattered console was embedded in his shoulder. Blood covered the front of his shirt, a glistening, terrible black in the dim light. "Cade," she whispered. Nothing. Terror, cold and absolute, cut through her shock. She fumbled with the release on her harness and fell in a heap onto the buckled ceiling. Ignoring the pain in her ribs, she crawled to him. His release was jammed. She pulled the emergency cutter from the wall, her hands shaking so hard she could barely hold it. She sliced through the harness, and he collapsed onto her. He was a dead weight, so heavy. But her terror gave her a strength she did not know she possessed. "I will not let you die," she grunted, pulling him by the arms. She dragged him from the smoking cockpit, out of the wreckage, and into the dim, cold air of the ravine floor. The two remaining bounty hunter ships were circling far above, like vultures, their searchlights sweeping the upper ridges. They hadn't pinpointed the crash site yet. She scanned the ravine wall. There, a shadow within a shadow. A narrow cleft in the rock, barely large enough to be called a cave. She hooked her arms under his and pulled. She dragged him across the sharp rocks, his boots leaving a dark trail. Every few feet she had to stop, her lungs burning, her body screaming, but she kept going. She pulled him into the darkness, into the small, sheltered cave, collapsing behind him as she finally let him go. They were hidden. Safe, for now. She crawled to him. His breathing was shallow, a faint, wet rattle. His skin was already cold, clammy. "Cade," she pleaded, touching his face. She tore a strip from his coat, trying to staunch the bleeding from his shoulder, but the blood just welled up around her fingers. It was too much. He was dying. "No," she whispered, her voice breaking. The arena, the tunnels, the fight. It was all for nothing. "You can't. You survived the pit for 6 years. You survived the juggernaut. You will not die from this. You will not." She shook him, her desperation rising. "Cade, wake up. That's an order. Captain, wake up." His eyelids fluttered. A low groan escaped his lip. Tears streamed down her face, cutting paths through the grime and blood. She leaned down, cradling his face in her hands, her forehead resting against his. The thought of being alone again, of him being gone, was an agony she could not bear. "Don't leave me," she begged, her voice a raw, broken whisper. "Not like this. After all this, don't you leave me." She kissed him. It was not a kiss of passion or of love. It was a desperate, gentle, warm press of her lips to his, a frantic plea for life, a futile attempt to breathe her own fire back into him. His eyes opened. They weren't unfocused. They weren't weak. They were sharp, cold, and clear. The survivor, the soldier, was looking right through her. He stared at her for a long, silent moment, his expression unreadable. He took a ragged breath, and his voice was a painful, gravelly rasp. "I told you," he whispered. "I told you not to trust anyone." Her heart shattered. "Especially not me." A shadow fell over the mouth of the cave, blocking the faint light. A man stood there, a hulking figure in the scavenged, spiked armor of an arena champion. He held a heavy, powered axe in one hand. He laughed, a dry, cracked sound that echoed in the small space. "Well, well, the beast of Terra, brought low by a girl." The figure stepped into the cave, and the dim light fell on a face that was a ruin of scars, his eyes glowing with a feverish, wild madness. "I always knew you had a weakness, Cade." Cade's eyes narrowed, a new, cold fire replacing the pain. "Cowl." Sirelia recoiled, her heart freezing at Cade's words. The kiss, her desperate plea, turned to ash in her mouth. He had seen her vulnerability and thrown it back in her face. Cowl's dry laughter filled the small cave. That's the Cade I remember. Always the lone wolf, always pushing away the hand that feeds. He hefted his powered axe, its energy field humming in the cold air. She's a pretty thing, Cade, worth a lot more than you. The warden wants her, and those bounty hunters up there, they work for him. Cade tried to push himself up, his hand gripping the piece of sharpened pipe he still had at his belt. He was too weak. He collapsed back against the rock, his face pale with blood loss and fury. Get out, Call. Oh, I will. With her, Call took a step inside. But I'm offering you a choice, a courtesy, for old times. I'm not going with you, Sirelia said, her voice shaking but hard. Call ignored her, his mad eyes fixed on Cade. There's a rebellion brewing. Cade, deep in the core, they've got a way out. They've been quiet for years, but they're ready to move. You're no rebel, Cade rasped. I'm a survivor just like you, and I'm smart enough to play both sides. He gestured with his axe. Here's the deal. The warden wants the princess. He thinks she'll stop the broadcasts. Calm the systems down. He'll pay me, and he'll give me a pardon. But the rebels, they want you. They think you're some kind of god, the man who tamed the pit. He grinned, a broken-toothed grimace. So, I'll take her to the warden's transport. In exchange, I'll tell the rebels where to find you. I'll even give you this. He tossed a small military-grade med injector onto the cave floor. It'll clot that wound, get you on your feet. You get to be their hero. I get my freedom. Everybody wins. And if I say no, Sirelia challenged. Cowl's grin vanished. Then I kill him, take you anyway, and tell the bounty hunters I found you wandering alone after he died in the crash. His choice, not yours. Sirelia looked at Cade. He was bleeding out. The med injector was his only chance. She saw the hatred in his eyes, the absolute refusal to bargain. He would die before he accepted this. And she, a princess of House Netherian, would not. She was a politician. She understood negotiation, and she understood betrayal. She stood, stepping between Cawl and Cade. He's not in a position to choose. Sirelia, no, Cade warned, his voice a low growl. So, you're the negotiator now, little bird? Cawl laughed. What's your offer? I'll go with you, she said, her voice clear and cold. I won't fight. I won't scream. I will walk onto that transport as your prize. Cowl's eyes narrowed, suspicious. Just like that? On 2 conditions. She did not tremble. First, you give him the injector, now. And second, you said there's a rebellion. I won't be traded to the warden. I want to be traded to them. Cawl stared at her, then burst out laughing. To the rebels? Why? They're slaves. They have nothing. They have a way out, she said, and they're the only ones who can expose the truth about the compact. The warden will silence me. The rebels will give me a voice. I'm worthless to them. Cawl. But as the princess who exposed the Krelios genocide, I'm the key to their entire uprising. I am leveraged. And so is he. She saw the greedy calculation in his mad eyes. He was seeing it. A bigger prize. A seat at the table with the rebel leaders, with both Cade and the princess as his bargaining chips. A clever bird, he mused. Much smarter than this lump of muscle. Very well, we have a deal. He kicked the med injector over to her. Sirelia snatched it. She knelt by Cade, ignoring the fury in his eyes. Don't do this, he hissed. This is not a debate, Captain, she whispered back, her voice all ice. She jammed the injector against his neck and pressed the trigger. Cade roared, a strangled, painful sound as the high-dose coagulants and stimulants flooded his system. His back arched, his muscles seizing. The bleeding from his shoulder and side slowed almost instantly, the raw edges of the wound sizzling. But the shock of it, on top of his injuries, sent him into unconsciousness. His head lolled back. "He's tough. He'll wake up in an hour meaner than a razor snake," Call said, grabbing her arm. "Now, let's go. The transport is this way, and no tricks, little bird. I'm twice your size, and I'm not half as polite as he is." "You have my word," Sirelia said. He dragged her from the cave back into the ravine. "My word as a Netherian, I will follow you. He didn't know that a Netherian's word was a blade, sharpest when it seemed to be offered in peace. The transport was hidden in an adjoining canyon, a heavy armored personnel carrier, the kind used to move prisoners between sectors. Call shoved her into the back, a windowless metal box with 2 bench seats. He chained her wrist to a steel loop on the wall. "Just in case," he grunted, slamming the heavy door. She heard him move to the driver's compartment, the engine groaning to life. The carrier lurched, moving fast over the rocky terrain. She was alone in the dark. She gave it exactly 5 minutes. She pulled her feet up to the bench, bringing her chained wrist close to her boot, tucked inside the heavy coat Cade had given her. Her fingers had found it hours ago. A small, flat, razor-edged shard of metal, part of the Juggernaut's shrapnel, which she had palmed from the arena floor and hidden. She began to see the chain. It wasn't the chain she was cutting. It was the thick, worn leather strap of her wrist binding, the same one the guards had put on her in the Senate. The steel was just for show. The weakness was the leather. The carrier rumbled on. She worked, her fingers already raw, the metal shard biting deep. The leather was thick, but it was old. It began to give. The carrier slowed, then stopped. She heard voices, muffled, outside. Call was talking to someone. The back door hissed open. Call stood there, silhouetted against a dim red light. "We're at the checkpoint. They're moving a prisoner detail. Stay quiet." He slammed the door again. She didn't have much time. She pulled, twisted, and sawed. The last strand of leather snapped. Her hand was free. She stood, listening. The carrier's engine was idling. She moved to the bulkhead separating her from the driver's compartment. There was a small reinforced glass window, dark. She pressed her ear to it. "I don't care about your manifest," Call was saying. "I have clearance from the warden himself. Now, open the gate." A new voice. "We're not opening anything until the transfer is complete. We've got a dozen high-risk assets moving to processing. You wait, like everyone else." Sirelia's eyes darted around the dark compartment. She saw what she was looking for. A standard emergency release panel for the outer door. She tore it open. Inside was a large, red hydraulic lever. She put her hand on it. She took a deep breath. She had one chance. She had no weapon but the element of surprise. She yanked the lever down. The heavy outer door exploded outward with a hydraulic hiss, slamming into the rock wall of the checkpoint. An alarm blared. "What the?" she heard Cowell yell. She leaped from the transport. They were in a vast underground tunnel, lit by red emergency lights. 10 meters away, a group of a dozen prisoners in orange jumpsuits were being herded by 4 heavily armed guards. The guards spun, raising their plasma rifles, blinded by the sudden chaos. Cowell jumped from the driver's seat, his axe in his hand, his face a mask of rage. "You bitch!" "He's lying," Sirelia screamed to the guards, pointing at Cowell. "He's not with the warden. He's with the rebellion. He's here to free the prisoners." For a half second, Everyone froze. The guards, caught between the madman with the axe and the screaming princess, were confused. Call, realizing he'd been played, roared and charged, not at the guards, but at her. It was the opening Cade would have taken. "Now!" Sirelia shrieked to the prisoners. The prisoners, who had been waiting for any chance, didn't hesitate. They exploded into motion. The dozen unarmed, desperate men and women surged as one, not at the guards, but at their weapons. It was a suicidal, chaotic brawl. 2 prisoners went down in the first volley of plasma fire, but the others were on the guards, a wave of orange bodies fighting with fists and teeth. Cowell was almost on her. She dodged, rolling behind a stack of cargo crates. He swung his axe and it bit deep into the metal, sparks flying. A prisoner, a tall woman with a shaved head, tackled a guard, wrenched his rifle free and tossed it. "Princess!" The rifle skidded across the floor. Sirelia dove for it. She came up, the weapon heavy and unfamiliar in her hands. She pointed it at Cowell, who was pulling his axe free. "It's over, Cowell!" He just laughed and charged her. She pulled the trigger. The plasma bolt hit him square in the chest. He stopped, his eyes wide, looking down at the smoking, cauterized hole in his armor. He looked back up at her, a strange, surprised expression on his face. Then he fell. The fight was over. The 4 guards were down, the remaining 10 prisoners now armed. They stood in a circle, breathing heavily, their eyes on Sirelia. Who are you?" the tall woman asked. "The one who had thrown her the rifle." "She's the princess," one of the men whispered, his eyes wide. "The one from the broadcast. The one who defied the Senate." "Where is he?" another man asked, his voice full of awe. "Where is the beast? Is he with you?" The side door of the transport hissed open. Cade stood there, leaning heavily on the frame, his face a mask of pain and cold fury. He held his sharpened pipe in his hand. He had woken to the alarms, a second too late. He looked at Sirelia, at the rifle in her hands, at the body of Cowell on the floor. The prisoners gasped. Several of them instinctively took a step back. "It's him," the man whispered. "It's Cade." Cade's eyes swept over them, assessing the threat. "They're not enemies," Sirelia said, lowering the rifle. "They're rebels. Call was right about that, at least." "We are the forgotten," the tall woman said, stepping forward. "My name is Ilara. We heard what you did in the arena. Both of you. You gave us the courage to move." She looked at Cade, and her expression was not fear, but reverence. You are the myth, the one who survived. We follow you." "I'm not leading anyone," Cade spat, pushing himself off the transport. "Where is this rebellion?" "Deep," Ilara said. "Below the old mines. This way. We have to move before they send reinforcements." The rebel base was a hidden city, built in the massive, hollowed-out cavern of a dead geothermal vent. It was a place of scavenged tech and desperate hope, home to hundreds of prisoners, runaways, and political dissidents. They had their own generators, their own hydroponic farms, their own network. They were taken to a medical bay, a clean room carved from the rock. Sirelia's minor cuts were tended while Cade was forced onto a biobed. A rebel doctor, an old, weary man, worked on him, cutting the wreckage of the console from his shoulder and sealing the wounds properly. Cade was silent the entire time, his eyes closed, his jaw set. Ilara took Sirelia to a small command center. A map of the prison moon was projected on a wall. "Cowell was a fool," Ilara said, her voice sharp. "He thought he could play us against the warden, but he was useful. He told us you were coming. You knew? We've been watching you, Princess, since your speech at the Senate. We hacked the broadcast. You are the spark. She motioned back toward the medbay. Is the fire? What is this place? Sirelia asked, her voice hollow. What really happens here? Ilara's face hardened. She touched a console. A new file opened. It wasn't a map. It was a budget, a funding requisition stamped with the official seal of the Galactic Senate. The arena is just entertainment. Princess, a distraction. The real purpose of Erebus is this. She brought up video files, horrifying images, prisoners strapped to tables, men and women being injected with glowing green serums, their bodies convulsing. The same bioenhancers she had seen on the scavengers. Files on cybernetic replacements, on AI grafting. Hybrid weapons testing, Ilara said, her voice flat. The Compact wants soldiers who don't disobey, who doesn't have consciences. Sirelia stared, sickened. They're creating monsters. Yes, and they've been doing it for a decade. Ilara brought up another file, a list of shell corporations, funding sources, and at the top of the list, the primary investor, House Netherian. Sirelia's world stopped. The air left her lungs. No, that's impossible. Your father's house, Princess, your people. They funded this entire facility. The Krelios genocide wasn't their first atrocity. It was just an expansion. They've been using the Compact's traitors as raw materials for years. They funded the experiments that created the Juggernaut. They funded the experiments that were tested on Cade. Sirelia sank onto a bench. It wasn't just that her father had abandoned her. It wasn't just that he was complicit. He was the architect. Her entire life, her wealth, her status, was built on a foundation of torture and blood. The genocide she had tried to stop was just a line item in a budget she had inherited. When Cade was released from the med bay, his arm in a sling, his side bandaged, he found her sitting alone in a dark corridor, staring at a wall. He walked past her, not stopping. Wait. Her voice was a dead, flat thing. He stopped, but didn't turn around. Did you know? She asked. About what? My family. That they funded this. That they paid for what was done to you. He was silent for a long moment. I knew the money came from Core Worlds. I didn't care which politician signed the check. I care. She stood, and he finally turned to face her. His expression was cold, shuttered. You knew what I was. A senator's daughter, a politician, part of the system that put you here. And you still pulled me from that arena. You still gave me your coat. You still... Why? She stepped closer, her hands clenched at her sides. I've been trying to understand. I thought it was a conscience or pity, or even weakness. It was none of those, he said, his voice low. Then what? She demanded, her voice finally breaking. Why, Cade? After everything they did to you, why would you still protect me? He looked at her, and for the first time she saw the full, crushing weight of his self-loathing. The arena hadn't made him a beast. It had convinced him he was one. He saw her, the daughter of his creators, as his ultimate contamination. Because, he said, his voice a raw whisper, because it hurts more not to. The admission hung in the air, a confession of a humanity he could not kill, a connection he despised but could not sever. It was the most devastating and the most tender thing he had ever said. She stared at him, her heart breaking for him, for herself, for the galaxy built on their pain. She was the princess of a corrupt house. He was the monster they had built, and they were the only two people in the universe who understood. Her anger, her grief, her shame, all of it coalesced into a single burning need, a need to destroy the identities that were destroying them. Slowly, her hands trembling, she reached for the collar of her filthy prisoner's tunic. I am not my father's daughter. She tore the fabric, ripping it open. Cade tensed, his eyes narrowing, confused. What are you doing? I am not a princess. She pulled the tattered shirt from her shoulders, letting it fall to the floor. She stood before him in the dim hallway, wearing only the thin undershift and cargo pants. The cold air hit her skin. She was not trying to seduce him. She was surrendering. She was stripping away the politics, the titles, the power, the lies. I'm not your princess here, she whispered, her voice raw. And you are not their beast. She stepped forward, her eyes locked on his. She put her small, cold hand on his chest, over the scars. His heart was hammering against his ribs, a wild, trapped thing. He didn't move. He was stone. I see you, she said. His control shattered. He grabbed her, his good hand tangling in her hair, and his mouth crashed down on hers. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a kiss of fury, of desperation, of two people drowning and clinging to the only other wreckage in the storm. It was salt and blood and 6 years of rage. He kissed her like he was trying to consume her, to erase her, to finally feel something other than pain. She kissed him back with the same desperate, violent energy, her fingers digging into his arms. This was not about love. It was about survival. It was a raw, primal need to feel alive, to stake a claim, to burn the whole galaxy down with the heat of their shared, broken humanity. He half lifted, half dragged her into the small, dark alcove he had just left. The door hissed shut, plunging them into darkness. Clothes were torn, discarded without care. His hands were rough, his touch possessive, almost brutal. And she met him, scratch for scratch, bite for bite. They made love against the cold metal wall, a frantic, breathless, furious act of defiance. It was a clash of pain and need, a desperate, shared declaration that they were not dead yet. Afterward, they collapsed onto the narrow cot, their bodies slick with sweat, their limbs tangled. The silence of the rebel base hummed around them. Cyrelia fell into an exhausted, dreamless sleep, her head on his chest, her hand clutching his. Cade did not sleep. He stared at the metal ceiling in the dark, his good arm wrapped around her, holding her as if she were the only anchor in the void. He felt the warmth of her skin, the slowing of her breath. He had broken his one rule. He had trusted someone. He had let her in. And he knew, with a cold, absolute certainty, that it had just doomed them both. He stared into the darkness, and he whispered to the empty room, to the ghosts of his battalion, to the monster he had become. I don't know if I want to live through tomorrow. The door to the alcove chimed. Cade was instantly awake, his hand moving for a weapon that wasn't there. Cyrelia sat up, pulling a blanket around her. The door hissed open and it was Alara. She did not acknowledge the situation, her face was all business, but her eyes were grim. You're awake, she said to Cade. Good. A problem has come up. What is it? Cade asked, his voice flat as he pulled on his pants. The warden knows we're here. He knows the princess is with us. He's initiated a full moon lockdown and a core purge. They're flooding the lower levels with neurotoxin. We have to move, Cyrelia said, dressing quickly. We are. We have one way off this moon. A single long-range heavy freighter in a hidden dock. It's our only chance. Ilara's eyes settled on Cade, and her expression was one of deep, painful regret. There's a price, isn't there? Cade said. Yes, Ilara replied, her voice low. The dock is controlled by the warden's private guard, the very worst of them, and the launch controls. They're not on the ship. They're in the center of the old arena. Cyrelia looked at him, her heart stopping. No, The warden has reactivated the arena for one final broadcast, Ilara said. He knows the systems are in chaos. He's trying to regain control. He's issued a challenge to the entire moon. One last blood match. A match for what? Cade asked, though he already knew the answer. For her, Ilara said, nodding at Sirelia. He's broadcasting that he's recaptured the traitor princess, and that the beast is still at large. He's offering a full pardon and transport off-world to any champion who can defeat his new gladiator. It's a trap, Sirelia said. Of course it is, Ilara agreed, but it's also our only way. While all eyes are on the arena, our teams can storm the docking bay. But we need a distraction. We need someone to answer that challenge, someone to hold the arena and the warden's attention long enough for us to get the ship powered. She looked at Cade, her eyes pleading. We need you to fight, Captain, one last time. Cade looked at Ilara, the hum of the rebel base, a low thrum of anxiety around them. He processed her words not as a plea but as a tactical problem, a distraction, a sacrifice, a single-point failure that rested on him. I'll do it, he said. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. No. Sirelia stepped forward, her hands clenched. It's a trap. You said it yourself. The warden wants you dead. This is just an execution with a crowd. It's a distraction, Cade said, turning to her. His gray eyes were cold, but not with anger. It was the coldness of a soldier committing to an impossible objective. It buys you time. That's all that matters. You and Ilara get the rest of your people to that ship. He's not the only one with a job, Princess, Ilara said, her face grim. She nodded toward the command console. The warden has reactivated the arena. That means the entire primary broadcast network is live. He's trying to control the narrative. While he's focused on his show, we're storming the bay. She looked at Sirelia. He's going to be their monster. You need to be their voice. Before Sirelia could answer, the main screen in the command center flickered. The rebel network's stolen feed crackled, then cleared, replaced by the official insignia of the arena conclave. The familiar booming voice of the announcer filled the room, dripping with false gravity. A special galactic broadcast, authorized by the Warden of Erebus himself. Justice comes to the pit. The screen cut to a new, high-definition feed from the arena. It was empty, the sand raked clean, but the stands were already filling. The galaxy was tuning in. In light of the recent traitorous attacks on this facility, the announcer boomed, a new champion has emerged, a warrior who has seen the depths of the betrayal perpetrated by the escaped Princess Sirelia. The view shifted, zooming in on a holding cell. Inside, looking beaten but alive, was Call. His mad eyes were gone, replaced by a sullen, calculated anger. He was wearing the warden's colors. The gladiator Call, captured and interrogated, has revealed the full, shocking truth. The feed focused on Call. He licked his chapped lips and spoke. His voice carried across the systems. I was a fool, he snarled. I was used to it. That Netherian bitch, she's not what you think. She's a snake. He looked directly into the camera. She used the beast, Cade, promised him favors, promised him her body. If he'd get her out, she's a liar, a betrayer. She used him to murder compact guards. No, Sirelia whispered, her face pale. And so, the announcer's voice returned. The warden has decreed a final match, a trial by combat for the soul of Erebus, the beast, versus the betrayer. The screen filled with holographic fire, the two names smashing against each other. Cade watched, his expression unreadable. He's doing the warden's work, turning the narrative, making me the pawn and her the villain. He's lying, Sirelia said, her voice shaking with rage. They don't care, Cade said. He picked up a long, rebel-forged blade from the weapons table, testing its balance. It's a show, and I'm the star. He looked at Alara. It's time. The journey back to the arena was a tense, silent procession through the rebel tunnels. Cade was not the prisoner this time. He was clad in scavenged, matte black rebel armor. He was a soldier again, walking to a battlefield he understood. They reached the hidden lift, the same one he had used to escape. This was where they had to split. Cade would go up. Sirelia and Alara, with a squad of armed rebels, would move to a broadcast junction that ran parallel to the arena's main power conduit. Sirelia grabbed his arm, her fingers digging into his armor. This is insane. You don't have to kill him. Just stall, just survive. My job is to hold their attention, he said. That's all? Cade. Her voice broke, just slightly. Don't die. He looked at her, at the fire and fear in her eyes. He saw the princess who had faced down the scavengers, the woman who had stripped away her identity in a dark hallway. He leaned in, and his kiss was hard, brief, and final. A promise. Wasn't planning on it, he said. He stepped onto the lift, and as the doors closed, he never took his eyes off hers. The lift ascended, the roar of the crowd growing from a distant hum to a physical, deafening weight. The gates opened. Cade stepped out onto the hot sand. The arena was packed. 1 billion souls across the galaxy were watching. The sickly yellow sky seemed to press down, trapping the noise, the hate, the anticipation. On the far side, another gate opened. Cowell emerged. He was no longer the ragged madman from the ravine. The warden's medics had worked on him. He was armored, his eyes glowing with the telltale faint green of combat stimulants. He hefted his massive, powered axe, its energy field thrumming. "Spectators," the announcer screamed. "The beast, who let himself be led by a traitor's desires, the betrayer, who now fights for compact justice. 2 will enter, 1 will be redeemed." Call roared, a sound fueled by drugs and manufactured rage, and charged. Cade stood his ground. He held his new blade in a low, defensive stance. He let Call come. The axe swept down, a glittering arc of death meant to split him in 2. Cade moved, not with the frenetic energy of a beast, but with the cold, economical grace of a trained soldier. He deflected the blow, the impact jarring his arm, and spun away, using Cowell's own momentum against him. "You're fast, Cade!" Call snarled, recovering. "But she's not here to save you now. The warden promised me when I'm done with you." He attacked again, a wild, furious flurry. Cade parried, blocked, dodged. He was a rock in a storm. He was not trying to win. He was not trying to kill. He was buying time. Every second he stayed upright was another second for Alara and Sirelia. He took a glancing blow. The axe bit into his shoulder pauldron, sending sparks flying and staggering him. The crowd roared. Cade grunted, shoved Call back, and created space. He was breathing heavily, his old wounds aching. He had to give her the signal. He had to give her the platform. He got Call near the arena wall, where the main audio pickups were buried. "You want blood?" Cade suddenly roared, his voice cutting through the announcer's chatter. The crowd quieted, confused. The fight had momentarily paused. Call hesitated, thrown by the change. "You've had my blood for 6 years," Cade shouted, his voice amplified across the stars. "You've watched me bleed. Does it taste good?" The announcer stammered. "What? What is he doing? Gladiators do not speak." Cade ignored him, his eyes scanning the crowd, scanning the sky, speaking to the galaxy. "You watch us die, you cheer for monsters. But who are the monsters? The men in this pit, fighting for your entertainment? or the men who built it? Call, enraged by the delay, charged again. Shut up and die, traitor. The leaders who feed you lies while they burn worlds? Cade roared, ducking the wild swing. The senators who sign extinction orders and call it peace? The fight resumed, a desperate, brutal dance. Cade was on the defensive, using all his skill to stay alive, to keep his platform, to keep the galaxy listening. Miles away, in a dark, sparking utility tunnel, Ilara slammed her fist against a console. I'm in. The main broadcast feed is ours. But I can't break the encryption. It's a localized failsafe. It's the Netherian royal code. I can't bypass it. Sirelia looked at the flickering lines of code on the screen. She saw the familiar complex algorithms. She saw her mother's private key sequence. Our world is built on secrets. You must learn which ones to keep. Her hand, steady and cold, moved over the console. I can... She typed the 32-character sequence from memory, the code her mother had taught her, the key to their house's private archives. The system unlocked. A green light flashed. Access granted. He can't hold him off forever, Ilara said, her eyes on a small screen showing the arena fight. Cowell is fighting to kill. Cade is just surviving. Give me the feed, Sirelia said, her voice all ice. She jacked in the data slate from the rebel base, the one containing the truth. All of it, now! Across the galaxy, on a billion screens, the fight was raging. Cade had just taken another hit, a deep gash in his thigh. He was staggering. Cowell raised his axe for the final blow. Suddenly, the image split. On one side of the screen, Cowell. On the other, a grainy, horrifying video of a prisoner strapped to a table, his body convulsing as a glowing green serum was injected into his spine. The announcer's voice was frantic. We are experiencing technical difficulties. Do not adjust your... A new voice cut through, cold, clear, and female, silencing the entire compact. There is no difficulty, Sirelia said. This is the truth. The arena feed vanished. It was replaced by the Krelios atmospheric reports, by the shipping manifests, by the funding requisitions, stamped with the golden seal of her house. My name is Sirelia of House Netherian, her voice declared, echoing in the stunned arena and in homes across the core worlds. And this is the genocide my father and the Senate funded. The feed cut again. A new file, the military tribunal of Captain Cade Mercer. The audio was crisp. Captain Cade Mercer, the judge's voice intoned, for treason, for refusing to sanitize the Karen Valley. You are remanded to the arena of beasts. Sirelia's voice returned, layered over the footage. This is the beast you have been watching, a soldier of the Terran Expeditionary Force, a hero who refused an unlawful order to murder 50,000 civilians. This is the man your compact branded a traitor because he had a conscience. The images became more rapid, more horrifying. The hybrid weapons testing, the creation of the juggernaut, the files on the bioenhancers. This is what your peace is built on, she cried, her voice rising, a righteous burning fury. This is the stability the Senate protects. They don't just execute prisoners, they use them as raw materials, they build their monsters, then force you to cheer while their heroes kill them. This entire moon, this entire war, it's a lie. In the rebel command center, Ilara stared at her monitors, her mouth open. Gods, she did it. The galactic network chatter was exploding. It was not just confusion, it was rage. Cygnus is rioting, Ilara whispered, awestruck. The Krelios delegates have stormed the Senate floor. The Terrazine agreement has been suspended. The outer colonies are blockading the trade routes. She's broken it. She's broken the compact. Back in the arena, the broadcast was playing on the massive, kilometers-wide screens above the pit. Cowell had stopped fighting. He was staring, horrified, at the images of the experiments. The warden's voice, no longer synthetic but a real, panicked human voice, boomed over the arena's private comms. "Kill him! Shut down that feed! All guards to the arena! Kill them all!" Cowell saw his pardon, his freedom evaporating. He had been playing so by the warden, by the rebels, by everyone. He was just another pawn, left to die in the pit. He roared, a sound of pure nihilistic madness. He saw her. Cyrilia, Ilara, and a squad of armed rebels had emerged from a service tunnel, entering the arena floor. They were moving toward the central launch controls. "You!" Cowell shrieked, his voice broken. "This is your fault. You did this." He ignored Cade. He ignored the guards pouring into the stadium. He raised his axe and charged directly at Cyrilia. Cade had been watching, waiting. He had seen her emerge, and he knew his job was not done. He moved like lightning. He didn't just block. He didn't parry. He intercepted. As Cowell raised his axe to strike the princess, Cade's rebel blade, fast and silent, slid between his ribs and pierced his heart. No hesitation, no mercy. A clean, necessary, and final kill. Cowell stopped. He looked down at the blade in his chest. He looked up at Cade, his eyes full of a strange final surprise. Then he fell, dead before he hit the sand. The arena was silent. The guards, halfway onto the field, stopped, confused. The crowd, stunned by the broadcast, stunned by the kill, was utterly quiet. Cade stood over Cowell's body, pulling his blade free. He was bleeding from a dozen new wounds, his breath ragged. Cyrilia ran to him, the rebels forming a perimeter around them. She looked at Cowell's body, then at Cade. The weight of what they had just done, the sheer galaxy-spanning enormity of it, settled on them. They hadn't just exposed the truth. They had declared war on the entire system. She looked up at him, her voice a raw, trembling whisper. "They'll never let us be together now. We're the two most wanted people in the galaxy." Cade looked at her. He saw the princess who had hacked the galaxy, the woman who had fought beside him, the truth they had just unleashed. He grabbed her, his bloody, gauntleted hand tangling in her hair, and he kissed her. It was not the desperate, furious kiss from the dark alcove. It was a kiss of acceptance, a kiss of choice, a public, defiant, final declaration. In the center of the blood-soaked sand, with a billion souls watching, he chose her. The crowd stared. They saw the kiss on the giant screens, an image of raw, brutal honesty, a stark contrast to the decades of lies they had just witnessed. A new sound began to rumble through the stadium. It was not the cheer of bloodlust. It was not the silence of shock. It was a roar, a deep, primal roar of awe. Awe at the soldier who had refused to be a monster. Awe at the princess who had refused to be a pawn. Awe at the sheer, undeniable truth of them. The roar was drowned out by a new sound, the deafening rumble of engines, coming not from the gates, but from the sky. Cade and Cyrilia broke the kiss. Looking up, the sickly yellow sky was blotted out. Dozens of ships were descending. Not the sleek fighters of the bounty hunters, not the heavy cruisers of the compact. They were ugly, scavenged, mismatched transports. The rebel fleet, the massive long-range freighter at their center, fired its landing thrusters, its huge bulk settling over the arena. Doors hissed open. Armed prisoners, the forgotten, began rappelling down, securing the arena, engaging the panicked guards. Ilara stood beside Cade and Cyrilia, a plasma rifle in her hands, a fierce, triumphant smile on her face. "The docking bay is ours, Captain," she shouted over the noise. "The ships are hot. The rebellion is real." The roar of the rebel ships descending into the arena was not an ending. It was an ignition. Across the entire scarred surface of the prison moon, the rebellion, once a whisper in dark tunnels, erupted into a full-scale war. The arena, for so long a symbol of subjugation, became the beachhead of a desperate liberation. Warden drones, sleek, black, and built for murder, poured from hidden bays, their plasma weapons streaking the yellow sky. They were met by rebel mechs, towering ugly titans of scavenged mining equipment and welded armor, their bodies painted with the defiant orange of prisoner jumpsuits. The air filled with the shriek of metal and the concussion of explosions. "Cade, Cirelia, we have to move." Ilara, no longer just a rebel, but a general, bellowed over the din, firing her rifle at a drone that had strafed the sand. "The ships are for evacuation, but we can't leave, not yet." "Leave?" Cade's voice was a low growl, his eyes scanning the impossible odds. "The fight just started. The warden is in the central command tower," Ilara yelled, pointing to a massive black spire that pierced the clouds kilometers away. "He's locked down the moon. He controls the central AI, the orbital defenses and life support. He'll scuttle this entire rock and kill us all before he lets us win. We have to take that tower." Cade looked at the chaotic battle. Hundreds of prisoners, many armed with nothing but sharpened pipes and salvaged sidearms, were being cut down. "A frontal assault? We'll be slaughtered before we get halfway there." "Not a frontal assault," Cirelia said, her voice cutting through the chaos. Her mind, the politician's mind, the strategist's mind, saw the path. "A surgical strike. We cut off the head. He's locked in that tower. He feels safe. He won't be expecting a direct attack on him." "She's right," Ilara said, a fierce grin on her face. "A small squad, through the tunnels. We can get to the base of the spire, but Cade, they need to see you. The rebellion needs its symbol. We need to lead them." "Then get us a transport," Cade said, his eyes meeting Cirelia's. "We're not sneaking. We're leading." A rebel-piloted ground transport, a heavy six-wheeled vehicle with a scavenged plasma cannon welded to its roof, skidded onto the arena sand, its tires churning. Cade, Cirelia, Ilara, and a hand-picked squad of 10 elite forgotten fighters piled in. "Punch through them!" Cade roared at the driver. The transport burst from the arena gates, smashing through the warden's flaming barricade. The battle for Erebus had begun. It was a running fight across the desolate, cratered surface of the moon. Warden drones, fast and insect-like, swarmed them, a cloud of angry, black metal. The plasma cannon on the roof boomed, taking them out of the sky one by one. Rebel mechs, fighting a desperate block-by-block war, cleared a path, their pilots shouting Cade's name over the open comm channels. They were halfway to the tower, racing through a deep canyon of prison blocks, when a new, terrifying silhouette stepped out from behind a ruined building. It was a warden-class juggernaut, a twin to the beast Cade had slain in the arena. But this one was black, sleek, and bristling with military-grade weapons. "It's blocking the path," the driver yelled, slamming on the brakes. The juggernaut's plasma cannon whined, firing a single devastating bolt that vaporized the ground where they had been a second before. The transport swerved, its metal hull screaming as it scraped against a rock wall. "I'll draw its fire," Cade said, his voice grim. He grabbed his blade and hit the side door release. "No!" Cirelia grabbed his arm. His wounds from the crash, from Kaal, were seeping through his new armor. "You can't fight that. Not again. You're injured." "Just keep its attention," he said, and launched himself from the moving vehicle. He rolled onto the rocky ground, his body screaming in protest. He ignored the pain, forcing himself to his feet. "Hey!" he roared, firing his sidearm at the Juggernaut's armored head. The shots sparked uselessly. "You want the beast? I'm right here." The massive machine's red optical sensors, cold and analytical, swiveled. It identified the target. Its primary directive, the Warden's final desperate order, echoed in its synthetic brain. Kill Cade. Terminate the symbol. It ignored the transport and turned its full, terrifying arsenal aimed at the lone man. "Go now!" Cade yelled to the transport, diving behind a colossal fallen girder as a rain of plasma fire superheated the air around him. The transport sped past, racing for the cover of the tower. Sirelia watched from the rear viewport, her heart climbing into her throat, as Cade, a tiny, defiant figure against a 4-ton war machine, prepared to make his last stand. "We can't just leave him," she screamed at Ilara. "We have to," Ilara said, her face a mask of granite. "The tower is the objective, and he knows the mission. He's buying us our chance." But Sirelia's mind was already working, connecting, processing. "He's not just a distraction," she said, her voice suddenly calm. "He's a symbol, and the Warden knows it. He wants to execute him publicly." She looked at the comms panel, at the live, galaxy-wide broadcast feed she had hijacked. It was still streaming, still showing the chaos of the battle, but she controlled the source. She grabbed the main broadcast microphone. "Cade, can you hear me?" His voice came back, strained, over the tactical comm, punctuated by an explosion. "A little. Busy, Princess." He was sprinting, dodging a volley of laser fire that stitched the ground at his heels. "The Juggernaut," she said, her voice clear and strong. "It's a new model, the Warden's own, but it's running the same core programming as the Arena Beast. I saw it in the Rebel files. It's routed through the central AI. If we take the tower, we can stop it." She hit the primary broadcast switch, her voice, no longer just for him, but for the galaxy, for every rebel on the blood-soaked moon, boomed from every speaker. "This is Princess Sirelia," she announced. The fighting on the transport momentarily stopped, the rebel squad staring at her. "All rebel forces, Captain Cade Mercer is engaging the Warden's Juggernaut in Sector 4. He is alone. He is buying our way to the command tower. We are not leaving him to die." She looked at her tactical map, her mind processing the battlefield like a grand chessboard. "All mechs, converge on him. Form a defensive perimeter. All fighters, provide air support. Do not let that machine land a killing blow. Captain Mercer must not fall." It was the first true order she had ever given. It was not a plea. It was not a negotiation. It was the command of a queen. "Yes, Your Highness." A mech pilot's voice, thick with awe and newfound purpose, crackled back. The tide of the battle, a chaotic, sprawling mess, instantly turned. Rebel forces who had been fighting separate, desperate skirmishes suddenly had a single unifying purpose: protect the captain. Sirelia watched on the tactical feed as orange-painted mechs and small, scrappy fighters swarmed Sector 4. They built a wall of fire and steel around Cade, shielding him from the Juggernaut, several mechs sacrificing themselves to block plasma bolts meant for him. The transport slammed to a halt at the base of the black, silent tower. "We're here," Ilara said, hitting the door release. They piled out, the squad forming a defensive perimeter around the sealed, massive steel doors. "The central AI controls it," Ilara said, pounding a useless fist against the metal. "It's locked down. We can't get in." "Then we're too late," a rebel fighter said, his voice grim. "No." Cade's voice came over the comms, a painful, choked gasp. "The Juggernaut. It's got a weakness." He was broadcasting on Cirelia's open channel. He was speaking to her. The armor, on its back, the main power conduit. It's shielded, but the shields flicker when it fires the main cannon. It's a timing problem. He's wounded, Cirelia said, her voice tight, hearing the wet rattle in his breath. He can't do it alone. She looked at the sealed door, then at the broadcast mic. But he's not alone. Her voice rose, broadcasting again to the entire moon. He's given us the key. All forces in Sector 4, listen to me. Focus your fire on the Juggernaut's back. Wait for it to fire. Then hit it with everything you have. They heard the battle rage over the comms, the high-pitched, terrifying whine of the Juggernaut's main cannon. Now! Cade roared, a sustained, massive volley of rebel rockets and concentrated plasma fire. A deafening electronic scream that shook the tower itself. Then, silence. Target, eliminated. A pilot's voice came back, breathless and shaking. The Juggernaut is down. The captain is down. But he's alive. He's alive. A wild cheer went up from the rebel squad at the base of the tower. At that exact instant, the massive steel doors in front of them groaned, vibrated, and slid open with a hiss. Ilara stared into the dark interior. The Juggernaut was tied to the tower's primary defense system. She breathed. He did it. He opened the door for us. Let's not waste it, Cirelia said, chambering a round into her plasma rifle. She turned to Ilara. Stay here. Coordinate the evacuation, get the wounded, including Cade, to the freighter. Get those ships ready to launch. Ilara grabbed her arm. Where are you going? To finish this. Cirelia nodded to the 4 remaining rebels in her squad. With me. We're going to the top floor. The tower was eerily silent. They ascended in a high-speed glass lift, moving past floors of dark, automated terminals and dormant server banks. The warden, arrogant and isolated, had left his inner sanctum completely undefended, believing his Juggernaut was invincible. The lift doors opened with a soft chime. They were in the penthouse, a vast circular room with a 360-degree holographic view of the prison moon, now engulfed in the fires of the rebellion. The warden was there. He was not a monster. He was not a synthetic voice. He was just a man, a small, older man with thinning gray hair, dressed in a pristine, white compact uniform. He stood calmly by a massive console, watching the battle rage below. Princess Cirelia, he said, his voice polite, as if she were a guest. He did not turn around. You have caused a great deal of trouble. My Juggernaut was a flawless piece of engineering. It's over, Warden, Cirelia said, her rifle aimed at his center mass. The 4 rebels fanned out, securing the room. Surrender the AI core. Shut down the orbital defenses. Surrender? The warden laughed, a dry, thin sound that grated on the nerves. My dear, you haven't won. You've just broadcast your own execution. He tapped a command on his console. The Galactic Council has been watching your little performance. The Krelios Agreement has collapsed. The outer colonies are in open revolt. The Compact, as we know it, is fracturing at this very moment. Because of you, she spat. Because of your lies, your experiments, your genocide. Because of your truth, he corrected, finally turning to face her. He was smiling, his eyes calm and empty. Stability was built on those lies. Peace was maintained by those experiments. And now, you've destroyed it. The member worlds are terrified. They need a villain. They need a scapegoat. A new alert chimed on Cirelia's comm. It wasn't from Ilara. It was a primary compact-level hail, bypassing all local protocols. Ma'am, one of her rebels said, his voice awed. A channel just opened. From the Galactic Council flagship. It's the High Chancellor. A holographic image flickered to life in the center of the room. The High Chancellor, the same towering being of pure energy in an obsidian suit who had condemned her, materialized. His form seemed to shimmer with uncontrolled rage. "Princess Sirelia," the synthetic voice boomed, shaking the very room. "You have destabilized 100 years of peace. You are responsible for the deaths of thousands and the imminent collapse of inter-system trade." "I am responsible for the truth," Sirelia said, her rifle never wavering from the warden. "The truth is a luxury we can no longer afford," the Chancellor thundered. "Your broadcast has given credibility to every terrorist and separatist movement on every fringe world. You must be silenced. And you, Warden, you have failed. Your facility is lost. Your sentence is death." "As you say, High Chancellor," the warden said, and with a swift, utterly calm motion, he placed a small plasma pistol under his own chin and pulled the trigger. His body collapsed, a neat, efficient, and silent end. Sirelia did not flinch. She stared at the High Chancellor's shimmering form. "So you'll kill me too? You'll make me a martyr? You think that will stop what I've started?" The Chancellor was silent. The fires of the rebellion were visible on the horizon, even from the hologram. He was watching his galaxy burn. "What? Do you want to?" The Chancellor's voice was suddenly weaker, quieter, stripped of its synthetic thunder. It was the voice of a being that was well and truly beaten. "The Compact cannot survive this. We cannot fight a civil war in the outer colonies. We need this to end." "I want them free," Sirelia said, her voice hard as a diamond. "All of them. Every prisoner on this moon. I want full pardons for every member of the Forgotten." "Done," the Chancellor said instantly. "An acceptable loss. What else?" "I want the truth broadcast. The full truth. The Cairn Valley massacre. The hybrid weapons testing. My father's complicity. All of it. A full public confession from the Senate." "That is impossible," the Chancellor roared. "It would be the end of the government. It would be anarchy." "It's the end of this government," Sirelia corrected. "A new one can be built on the truth. The people deserve that." "No, we cannot," the Chancellor stammered. "We will offer you a compromise." He knew he was negotiating for his very existence. "We cannot survive the full truth. Not now. But we can survive a story. We will acknowledge the Krelios tragedy. We will acknowledge the Warden's illegal experimentation, acting alone. Your father will be censured. He will be removed from power. We will clean house." "It's not enough," she said, her finger tightening on the trigger. "That is all you will get," the Chancellor snapped. "In return, you vanish. You and your soldier. The galaxy will be told you died in the uprising. Tragic heroes who exposed the Warden. The rebellion will have its martyrs. The Compact will have its stability. This is the only way." Sirelia was about to refuse. It was a lie, another filthy political compromise. Then Cade's voice, weak and ragged, came over her private comm. He was in the freighter's medbay, his voice patched through by Alara. "Sirelia, take the deal." "Cade, you're alive." Relief washed over her, so potent it almost buckled her knees. "Alive enough," he rasped. "Ilara's here. She's right. The rebellion is real. It's bigger than this moon now. They're calling you their queen." I can't leave them," she whispered, her resolve wavering. "You're not leaving them," he said, his voice firm. "You're giving them their freedom. You've won the war. Sirelia, don't lose the peace. Take the deal. Get them out." She looked at the High Chancellor, at the representation of a corrupt galaxy. She had one more condition, one more blade to twist. Him, she said. Captain Cade Mercer, he is not a beast. He is not a soldier. He is a hero. I will not vanish until his name is cleared. I want him recognized. I want him pardoned. I want him honored, publicly. He is a symbol of the rebellion, the Chancellor argued. He is a traitor who defied the compact. He is the only thing that will make the rebellion stand down, she countered, her voice ringing with absolute authority. They follow him. They will not accept martyrdom. They will only accept justice. You will clear his name, High Chancellor. You will restore his rank. You will broadcast his truth, his service, his honor. Or I will burn your compact to the ground, starting with this tower. She aimed her rifle at the central AI core. The High Chancellor stared at her. He saw the Netherian steel in her eyes, the same fire that had set his galaxy ablaze. She was not bluffing. You will have his pardon, the Chancellor said, his voice heavy with the weight of his utter defeat. We will broadcast his full commendation. We will say he died a hero, clearing his name, fighting to expose the Warden. And you will be gone. Both of you, exiled to the uncharted territories, far from power, forever. Do we have an agreement? Sirelia looked out the window at the burning moon, at the rebel ships in the sky, free and ascendant. She thought of a life of war, of leading a rebellion she had never asked for. Then she thought of Cade, of his hand in hers, of a quiet field somewhere. She keyed her calm. Ilara, the prisoners are pardoned. The compact is surrendering and it's over. Get them home. She turned back to the hologram. We have an agreement. She looked at the most powerful being in the galaxy, and she gave her last order. Freedom with him is more than power alone. The sky was a deep, impossible shade of violet. Twin suns, one gold, one white, were setting over a field of tall, silver-blue grass that whispered in the breeze. A small, sturdy house, built of local wood and dark, volcanic stone, sat on a hill overlooking a quiet, turquoise ocean. It had been 10 years. 10 years since the fires of Erebus. 10 years since the Galactic Council broadcast the story of the heroic fallen Captain Mercer and the tragic Princess Sirelia, who had died exposing the Compact's corruption. 10 years since a single unmarked freighter, its transponder scrubbed, had slipped into the uncharted territories and never returned. A woman stood on the wooden porch, her dark hair longer now, threaded with a few fine strands of silver. She was watching a child, a small boy of about 6 with his mother's sharp, intelligent eyes and his father's unruly dark hair. Chase the glittering dragonfly-like insects in the field. A man walked up behind her, placing his large, calloused hands on her shoulders. He was broader now, his face no longer gaunt, but weathered and calm. The scars were still there, a pale, white map of a life he had barely survived, but the cold, feral light in his eyes was gone. He was Cade. He held 2 freshly picked bright orange melons in his hands. He was a farmer, a husband, a father. He's getting fast, Cade said, his voice a low, content rumble. He gets it from his mother. Sirelia smiled, leaning back against his chest. A new family, neighbors from the small settlement 2 valleys over, was walking up the dirt path. They were new arrivals, refugees from a trade dispute in the core worlds, looking for a fresh start on a world that had no name. Good evening, the neighbor, a thin woman, called out. Sirelia and Cade waved. The woman's husband whispered to her, loud enough to carry on the still evening breeze. He was pointing at Cade's back, at the terrible, intricate network of old white scars visible under his thin linen shirt. Gods, that's him, isn't it? The husband whispered, his voice full of a fearful, mythic awe. The one they talk about in the bars, The beast of Erebus. The gladiator. They said he died. Cerelia tensed, just slightly. She felt the old, familiar anger flicker, a ghost in her heart. Cade's hands on her shoulders did not move. He was still, not angry, not haunted, just patient. The neighbor's wife looked at Cade, who was smiling, watching his son tumble in the grass. She looked at the quiet farm, at the peaceful valley. She looked back at her husband and hushed him, a look of profound confusion on her face. Cerelia watched them, and the anger faded, replaced by a quiet, profound peace. The galaxy could have its stories. It could have its myths. She had the truth, her neighbor's wife, still curious. Stepped a little closer, her eyes wide. He's the one they call the beast? Cerelia smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reached her eyes. She put her hand over Cade's, lacing her fingers with his. No, she said, her voice soft but clear in the twilight. That's the human who tamed everything in me.